Why create man, this most destructive and violent creature, when you could make him angels? And then look at the answer.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is going on, brothers and sisters? It's Daniel here. We're back here again today, alhamdulillah, with Dad.
Hello.
We got Dad. We're going to be reacting to The Purpose of Life. I believe it's called Purpose of Life by Dr. Jeffrey Lang. I'm sure most of you have seen this video already. I've seen, I think, all of it before myself, but it's been a while, so we'll see. We'll see what else I noticed I didn't see before. My dad's never seen this, and I was just explaining to my dad. So I've skipped about 10 minutes of this video already because he's just kind of giving his backstory. You know, growing up in America, his father was an alcoholic and would abuse his mother, and it kind of created this worldview of resentment and anger and confusion. Why is my life so hard and bad? And that kind of led him to deny the existence of God. If God exists and God is good, then why did he allow such horrible things? Why does he? And not only that, but he saw, you know, children starving in the world and all these things that didn't make sense. How could God possibly allow this?
So you said he was raised in a Catholic school and later professed that he was an atheist?
Right. Yeah. So he'll talk about it more, but I think where he's at in the story now, he's a young man as an atheist, and then a friend of his ends up giving him a Quran.
Vietnam, get napalmed and run down the street naked on fire when they'd done nothing to deserve it. You know, why does he let the race riots go on? Why does he let the leaders be assassinated? Why does he just let the violence go on and on and on for people who had nothing to do with it? It wasn't of their own making. Why didn't he just make us angels and pop us into heaven if he could make us angels, which I was always taught he could? Why did he make us so susceptible to sin? Why didn't he make us impervious to it, like he made the angels? Is this the best world he could create, I thought? Is this the most perfect world he could create for our existence, for our beginning? I just couldn't figure it. And all the explanations I received from priests and doctors and lawyers, you know, from whoever, you know, spoke to me or taught me, they just didn't make sense to me. In any case, so I became an atheist when I was 16, even though I was going to Catholic school at the time. Declared myself an atheist in one class. It was a confrontation between me and a priest. We were talking about God and the purpose of life. And I expressed my views, and he said, well, then you don't believe in God. I said, well, I guess I don't. And then through my junior and senior year of high school, I got an F in religion, even though I continued to do very well in the tests. In any case, when I was 28, to make a long story short, some friends of mine gave me a copy of the Quran. And one night I was sitting in Diamond Heights, my apartment in Diamond Heights in San Francisco. I was working that time at the University of San Francisco. I was 27, 28 at that time, I can't remember. And I ran out of stuff to read.
Lion's Den.
And I took this gift that my friends gave me and I began to read it. And I came to the first verse. Well, I opened the Quran, read the first page, then the second, and then very quickly, in the second surah, about 37 verses into the Quran, I came upon the story of mankind. And I have to admit, I read through it very quickly. It was about 9, 10 verses long, story of the first man and woman. And I recognized some of the details. It was similar to what I had learned when I was a child, but I noticed that there was something wrong. It was apparent to me that whoever authored this Quran, of course I wasn't a Muslim at the time, so I didn't have any idea who that was, whoever authored this Quran clearly did not understand the real meaning of the story, because they had obviously gotten the details confused. They didn't even understand the whole purpose of the story. And so I just read through it once, and then I read through it again, just to try to see what kind of point the author was making, and then I read through it a third time and a fourth, and then I realized this is something strange going on here. I'm going to read this much more carefully. I'm going to need to go through this story line by line, verse by verse, because it's obvious that the author is trying to bring out another point, and I wasn't quite sure what it was, but definitely he packs a lot of meaning into almost every word. And I thought the writer at least seems to have a great measure of brilliance. And so I'll try to sort of take you through what my experience was as quickly as I can. So I came to the 30th verse of the second surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, and it began like this. It said, "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." The Arabic word is khalifa. It means a representative or an emissary of mine. "I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." And they said, the angels said, "Will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify your holiness?" And God said, he said, "Truly I know what you do not know." See, that's the verse that hooked me. That's the verse that caught my attention. That's the one that kept on making me read the story again and again and again. Because listen to the way it begins. "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a representative of mine on earth, a vicegerent of mine, an emissary, one who acts on my behalf. I thought, that's not the way it goes. You're not supposed to be placing man on earth in some positive role, some elective office. You place man on earth as a punishment for his sin. Clearly, I knew the author didn't quite get the point. But still, it was an amazing line. But then I come to the next line, and it says, and the angels say, will you place her in one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at it again. I couldn't believe the question. They said, will you place her in one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at that and I said, exactly. That would be my question. Why would you create this being, supposedly for some positive role, when he's capable of doing tremendous wrongdoing? When he could spread corruption and shed much blood? Why would you create this violent and pernicious creature when you could create angels? As the angels clearly say, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you. They're asking one of the most fundamental questions in the entire history of religion. Why create you, man, this utterly fallible creature, this creature who could rebel against God's will, who could do such tremendous wrongdoing, who could wreak havoc like no other creature on earth, when you can make them angels? And look where the question is being asked. It's being asked in heaven. It's almost like saying, look, why don't you just make him angels and be up here in heaven with us, you know? Why don't you just make him angels, pop him into heaven, he's fine. Why would you put him on earth where he could feel distant from you, where he can work out his worst criminal tendencies, act them out, feeling somehow independent and apart from you and free to do whatever he wants, when you could just make him angels and put him into heaven and make them perfectly submissive to your will? I looked at that question and said, that's my question.
I want to hear the answer.
I'm not even a single verse into the story of mankind, and there before me I see my question. That whole question, everything that I ever thought, everything that I ever experienced, everything that I ever knew was in that question. It was as if the author took my life and wanted to pick out exactly the right question to humiliate me, to provoke me, to anger me. Why create man, this most destructive and violent creature, when you could make him angels? And then look at the answer. And he said, God said, truly I know what you do not know. You know, in modern parlance, we would say, I know exactly what I'm doing. I read that and said, what? You know what you do not know? You know exactly what you're doing? Well, please inform me. Tell me what you're doing. Because, you know, I'm 28 years old and I haven't figured out it yet. And I have a lot of issues that I'm still dealing with that's connected to this question. You can't just get off that easy. You can't just tell me you know exactly what you're doing. Not after what I've been through. Not after you made me this way. And then I realized, of course, I was arguing with a God I didn't even believe in. And that would happen several times as I read through the Quran. And sometimes I would just get into such
arguments.
So agitated by what I read, I'd start arguing with this voice that I'm reading before me, that's calling to me. So we turn to the next verse. Well, it turns out that the Quran just doesn't dismiss the question. It starts to answer it a little bit. And in the next verse it says, and he taught Adam, God taught Adam, the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. So this verse is clearly referring to the previous one. But notice what it says. Now, from my own background, I remember Adam naming things, but it wasn't connected to any answer to any philosophical question. But here, notice what it says. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And I realized already, just from the first verse, you got to read these verses very carefully because it's packed with a lot of symbolism and meaning. And he taught Adam the names of all things. So here we see Adam is not only just a creature who knows how to name things, who's acquiring the gift of language, but he's also a learning creature. God is teaching him. Now right here, right in this verse, and it'll come even clearer in the subsequent verses, that the very first thing that the Quran is going to emphasize here is man's intellect. He is a learning creature. He is taught. And what is he taught? What is one of the great intellectual gifts he's given in response to the angel's question? The gift of language. Because through language, mankind can not only learn, but he could learn things not only through his own experience, but he could learn things that other people have experienced of times and places that are hundreds, thousands of years and miles separated from him. And so that all our knowledge becomes cumulative. Every generation learning from the generation before it. I'm learning today from authors I read from other sides of the world that may have existed 2,000 years ago. And so we all contribute to our collective learning and knowledge. And so I'll see later in the Quran, when the Quran will emphasize this again and again and again. Like in one verse it says, read in the name of your Lord who created. Created a man out of a tiny creature that clings. Read, it commands the reader. For your Lord is most bountiful. Why is he most bountiful? What great gift did he give you? For he taught man the use of the pen. And through it taught him what he otherwise could not know. And time again, the Quran will call upon man to use his intellectual faculties and swear by his intellectual faculties and to use them correctly because they play a fundamental role in guiding him to truth. I never came upon a scripture that puts so much emphasis on the correct use of our intellectual faculties, on the harnessing of reason in helping us attain to faith. And he taught Adam the names of all things. And then he placed them before the angels and said, tell me their names if you are right. Okay, you have this objection you have this natural question about this creation of mankind. Here, this mankind is this human being, this human creature is a learning creature. He has many intellectual gifts. Here, I'm going to place these things before you. Tell me their names if you are right about man. And what did the angels say? In the next verse they say, glory to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. They say this task, this intellectual test that's put before them is beyond their grasp. Notice what they emphasize. We have no knowledge. This would take knowledge. This would take an intellect that they don't possess. In truth, it is you who are knowing, the wise. You got it. It's easy for you. You're the knowing, the wise. You have knowledge. You have wisdom. But this would take knowledge and wisdom that is beyond us. And so in the next verse we read, and he said, oh, Adam, tell them their names. And when he had told them their names, notice how it's just like it's nothing for him. For mankind, he has this phenomenal ability. And when he had told them their names, as if it's just a triviality for man, he names them. Oh, Adam, tell them their names. And when he had told them their names, God said, did I not tell you that I know what is unseen in the heavens and the earth? And I know what you reveal and conceal? And he's clearly going back to the angel's question. Yes, you have these natural concerns about the creation of mankind. Yes, he could do these evil things. But look at this tremendous intellect he has. This is something you have overlooked that you haven't considered. And that's clearly the point of these verses. Even though I felt that the author didn't quite, it was as if I realized that he didn't misunderstand the story. He was taking one of the great stories in the history of humankind, one of the fundamental greatest stories in the history of mankind, and molding it and using it as a vehicle for an entirely original message. And God said, did I not tell you that I know what is unseen in the heavens and the earth? And I know what you reveal and what you conceal? In other words, didn't I tell you I know exactly what I'm doing? And then in the next, and didn't I not tell you that I know what you reveal and conceal? I looked at that. What question what did they reveal and what did they conceal? What did their question reveal and conceal? I thought about it for a minute. Oh, it's obvious. What did their question reveal? You just go back and look at the question. It revealed the sinful and sinister propensities of man. I mean, it's obvious, right? Why are you all looking at me like that? You're starting to scare me. You're all looking very serious. Am I losing you? Wow. Okay. So they revealed the sinister and evil propensities of man. But what did their question conceal? And all you have to do is think about it for a minute. Human beings, yes, they could do evil. Yes, they could do wrong. Yes, they could create misery. But they could also do exactly the opposite. They could choose to do evil. They could choose to do tremendous good. They could choose to do tremendous violence. They could choose to show tremendous compassion. They could choose to live by falsehood. They could choose to live by the greatest truths. They could be terribly ugly. They could be terribly beautiful. And up until that point in my life, I, like the angels, had only saw one side of the coin. And for the first time when I read that verse, believe it or not, it was an eye-opener for me. I had always been obsessed with the evil potentials of human beings. When I read that verse, I realized that, and I had a great example right in front of me with my own mom. I realized that I had been blinded by only one side of human nature. So we go on to the next verse. And behold, we said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they bowed down. But not so Iblis. Iblis is like the father of Satans, satanic beings, forces, creatures, existences. He refused and was arrogant. He was of those who reject faith. An interesting statement. And behold, we said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they bowed down. Bowing down could symbolize two things. Bowing down could symbolize the superiority or potential superiority of one being over another, and so they bowed down to them. Bowing down could also mean that they serve that creature in some respect. Of course, the Quran says that all beings serve God, all created beings serve God. But this verse seems to be indicating, and the rest of the Quran will make it clear, that these angelic beings, these angelic entities, will serve the development of mankind, We'll even see later that the satanic beings serve the development of mankind. Both forces, angelic and satanic, will serve the development of mankind. Because one will present man with a choice to do the most altruistic things. The other will simultaneously try to influence man in the opposite direction. And so human beings will be moral creatures, and will have to make moral decisions. And it's in those moral decisions that they will grow spiritually and morally as human beings. And they'll take that into the next life. And the angelic and the satanic forces will be catalysts for those moral choices that they make. They will heighten the human being's awareness of the rightfulness and the wrongfulness of the choice he's about to make. And the self, the soul, the nafs, as they say in Arabic, will have to make the ultimate choice between good and evil. And that choice, that test will come again and again and again as human beings either grow or decline. And those tests will come again and again and again to try to help him towards his spiritual evolution, to bring him back. But that choice is ultimately ours.
Did that say Neff?
Nefs. Yeah, it's like the soul. Yeah, like he said. Yeah, nefs. What do you think so far? I think his intellect is very admirable. He has a very good intellect. He's very rational. He asks good questions, and he's like honestly searching for the correct answer.
Yes. I follow him very well.
Right? He's easy to follow.
Easy for me to follow.
He must. I think it's because he's a professor of math.
You have to have logic.
You have to have logic, and you also have to have a talent to keep people listening. Yeah, because math can be very difficult.
Boring.
Very boring. So
Right.
he's kind of mastered being able to keep you engaged.
I like it.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. And so we said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they bowed down. But not so Iblis. Iblis is Satan, this rebellious force, this evil prompter, the one who whispers into the human heart. He comes into being. And with the introduction of Satan, we have the introduction of evil, that evil influences on human beings. And notice why Iblis does not bow down. He refuses because he was arrogant. You know, we often hear what's the root of all evil? In the West, it's always money, greed, etc. Here the Quran says that, seems to be saying that the root of all evil is not always material wants. It's not always money, it's not always greed. At the heart of evil is arrogance, putting yourself above all others, of assigning to yourself special priority and neglecting the rights of others, of pride and arrogance and envy, the source of evil. He was of those who reject faith. I looked at that verse and I said, okay, I get why you would create angels to sort of influence man in a positive direction. But why in this story now are you introducing Satan? What sort of role was Satan play? And then, of course, you just think about it for a minute and you say, yes. The story is telling us that on one hand, we have these magnanimous urgings come from one direction. On the other hand, we have these satanic urgings coming from another direction. In other words, the Quran is telling us that man is not only a learning creature, but he's a moral creature. He has understanding of right and wrong. And God infuses those, and allows those influences to come to him. Man is not only an intelligent being, but a moral being. And so, the Quran is not all that difficult to understand. You just sort of read it, I found, and you just sort of follow your nose through it and see what it's saying. I'm sure as most of you in this audience know. Okay, so we see that man is not only a learning creature, but he is a moral being as well. There's another verse in the Quran. It says, by the soul and that which whispers into it, or which breathes into it. It's morality, it's immorality, and it's God consciousness. Both of these we are under the influence of. And God allows us to be under the influence.
There's three.
He creates us to be exposed to both influences. And then the verse says, truly he is successful, who causes it to grow. Causes his soul, his self.
Morality might be the same
Versus immorality.
Say what?
He said morality, immorality.
And God consciousness.
Yeah.
I think he might be equating morality and God consciousness.
Good consciousness as one subject.
Yeah.
His real self to grow. And truly he is lost who stunts it, who disallows, who destroys his personal growth. So mankind is not only an intellectual being, but a moral being. And we said in the next verse, O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish, and eat freely thereof what you wish. But come not near.
I just want to say, I really like how I think this is often overlooked, is the creation story of Adam. I feel like that is one story that every single human can relate to, because we're all related to it. We all come from that story. That is the creation of humanity. And I guess the way that things happen and the scenarios involved in that creation story, I believe, are highly applicable to the questions that we get and the difficulties that we face in our life. That's what I find personally, is that
it is the foundation, right?
It's the foundation.
It's the beginning, the building
Right.
block.
Yeah.
It's the amino acid of.
Yeah. The atom.
Right.
It's the
It's
atom.
the nuclei.
Yeah.
It all began here.
Right. So I think for me, that's one of my favorite stories is the creation story of Adam. It seems most applicable to me, and I get the most value out of it when I read it. Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a way that they deal with the creation of Eve as well.
Yeah.
No, I wonder if he'll deal with that.
This tree. For then you will be among the wrongdoers. I looked at this verse and I was, starting to wonder if the author was drifting back to the old story. Again, I was confused. And we said, "O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in a garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish, but come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers." I thought it was drifting back to the old story. Man sins, man's punished for his sins with earthly life. Maybe the author is drifting, he had a good idea, and now he's drifting back to the sort of traditional story. Maybe he couldn't make his mind up what story he wanted. Except for a couple things about this verse, and this happened with almost every verse as I read through it, is that the whole tenor of the passage is sort of not what you would expect. I noticed that the Quran in this story has a tremendous penchant for understating things. Because it says, and said to Adam, "Dwell you and your spouse in a garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish," to Adam and his spouse, "but come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers." I mean, there's no sense of God being threatened by the possibility of man eating from the tree. In this story, we don't see in this verse, we don't see that God is nervous at the prospect, that he's threatened by the prospect, that he's anxious about it. The tree that he picks, it seems like he's just picking out any tree. Nothing special about the tree. Go not near this tree,
It's all a test.
for you will be among the wrongdoers. Satan will later come to him and tell him it's a tree of eternal life, of a kingdom that never decays. Turns out to be a complete falsehood in his part. Nothing special about the tree. It's just a tree. God's not nervous at the prospect at all. In the tradition that I came from, God is threatened by the prospect. He has to put an angel with a fiery sword by to protect the tree so that mankind never goes next to it again. I'm not putting it down, I'm just pointing out the difference of the story. They're both beautifully told. But he has to guard the tree. Why? Because if they eat from it, they'll become gods like us. This man, he already has a rebellious nature. Can you imagine if he eats from this tree? Can't let him get near that tree. But here, just, calmly says, "But if you do, you will be among the wrongdoers." God is not worried about himself. It's just warning man, making it clear that if you do this, you've committed a wrongful deed. Again, the whole tenor of all these verses that you read through it is God knows exactly what he's doing. Okay, next verse. "But Satan caused them to slip and expelled them from the state in which they were. And we said, Go you all down, some of you being the enemies of others, and on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time." What? I said? I mean, I was expecting now the rage, the anger, the violence, the jealousy. That's what I was expecting. Okay, they eat from the tree. Where's the rage, the violence? I'm going to punish you now. You're going to sweat on earth. And you're going to suffer, and you're going to stub your toe, and you're going to work, and you're going to labor. And you're going to die there for what you did. And where's the woman? Right? And the woman. Right? She's the one who's going to suffer the most. Right? She'll have to suffer labor pains and monthly cycles. Right? And bleeding and crying out when her children come into the world. She'll scream out. And worst of all, the greatest humiliation, the man will rule over her. When he's obviously her intellectual inferior because she and the angels she and Satan seduced him, and he just bumbled along and committed a real, wrong deed. Well, I don't mean to make light of it. But the story is obviously different, though. No threat here. As a matter of fact, look at the way it says, "O Adam, dwell you and your spouse in the garden, and eat freely thereof what you wish. But come not near this tree, for you will be among the wrongdoers." Then they make the mistake. "But Satan caused them to slip and expelled them from the state in which they were. And we said, Go all you down, some of you being enemies of others will be adversaries of others. Some of you will be adversaries of each other, and on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time." This is not a deity losing it. If you look at it, on earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. That's not the words of a of a God that has got lost, that is really extremely upset. On earth will be your dwelling place and provision for a time. When I walked into the hotel today, and they said, and it's this nice one up here, I don't know the name, I can't remember the name of it, but it has a continental breakfast. And they said, your room will be room 111, and there's a continental breakfast in the morning. I didn't say, I didn't think they were mad at me. Because they said, you're going to sleep here, and this is going to be your provision in the morning. Oh, thank you. But notice something else about this verse. I mean, when you read these verses for the first time, I don't know, maybe I'm nuts, and many people think I am. But when you read these verses for the first time, I mean, this is just so much that catches your attention. But Satan caused them to slip. I remember, I couldn't get that verse those words out of my head. Satan caused them to slip. To slip? The greatest sin in the history of the human race, and it's called a slip? In my culture, slip means, you just momentarily, for a fraction of a second, you lose your focus. It's not a big deal. My Uncle Bob used to always say to me, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, I slipped up. The understanding is it's no big deal. It's just a slip. That's what we say when we make a minor mistake. I slipped up. Don't worry about it. Never happen again. A slip, I said? Momentary loss of focus? The greatest sin in the history of humanity? Why we're all here? Why we're all suffering? Why we experience death? A slip? I didn't believe it. I went to my Arabian friends at that time. I didn't know any Arabic. I came to this verse. We went through it line by line. I said, now don't change any words. Just read them one at a time. But Satan made them, and I said, okay, this one right here. What does it mean? Tell me what that means. They looked at it. It says, slip. Slip. And expelled them from the state in which they were. A slip, I thought? But then maybe I was trying to force the traditional understanding, the traditional interpretation. Maybe it was just a slip. I mean, after all, they didn't commit murder. They didn't commit robbery, rape, pillaging, assault. They ate a couple of pieces of fruit. It's not the greatest sin in the history of humanity by any means. And then the next verse says, and then they were expelled from the state in which they were. Well, what state were they? Let's see now. Let's go back from where we started. First, mankind is being taught. We see he's an intellectual being. Then we show he's a moral being. Moral being means he's a being that's going to have to make choices. And then God gives him this choice. It's not a huge deal. It's not the gravest sin in the history of humanity by any means. It's minor by any standards. They make it, though. We see that God originally intended to put man on earth as his vicegerent. We see a period of preparation where he's being prepared intellectually, where he's growing as a moral creature. When does God finally put him on earth? What signals that he's ready to begin? He makes his first independent choice. It's not the worst deed in the history of humanity. It's minor on anybody's scale. But it shows that mankind is ready to act on his own, to be his own, to make his own choices, that God has empowered him to make choices, and he's ready to make them and carry them out, and see them most often to their expected ends. If God wills.
You said you've never seen it that way?
I have never thought of that story of eating the apple as being the sign that it's okay to release Adam onto the earth, and now he's free to make free will.
Yeah, that's kind of the Islamic understanding. And another important point is that there was no blame that Adam put on God there. And this is one of the, I guess, signs that Adam had virtue, and Adam was one of the greatest prophets, one of the great prophets, because Adam didn't blame God and say, well,
why'd you put it here?
Yeah, you would. Not only that, but like, you control everything. So you made me eat from the tree, and now you send me out of heaven. It's your fault. It's not my fault. You didn't do that.
Or out of the garden. Which is it?
Yeah, either way. Jannah. The word Jannah, I believe, in Arabic means garden.
Well, I think we went over this
I don't know.
last time we were talking about seventh heaven.
You said cloud 9.
Yeah, and I was wrong.
Yeah, I think some. Anyway, it's complicated,
Okay.
but the word Jannah that's used for like paradise means garden. So, yeah, my point is that we can also learn from what Adam didn't do there, and when we make a mistake, we don't blame God; we blame ourselves. Even though God is all powerful and all knowing, we still make our own choices, and we shouldn't blame God. And ultimately, this is what Islam is, at least to me. Islam means submission. And so we submit to the will of God, and instead of blaming God and saying, well, God controls everything, so it doesn't matter what I do, we submit to God and say, we don't know. Like at the beginning of the story, the angels ask, why are you doing this? God, why are you doing this? Why did you create this creation? It doesn't make any sense. They question God, and he didn't really go over Iblis. Iblis, not, at least I don't remember him talking about how Iblis didn't bow down to Adam. Did he mention that?
Yeah.
You remember that? Yeah. So Iblis didn't bow down to Adam. Iblis showed pride and arrogance over God. Satan thinks that he knows more than God. And
Definitely knows more than Adam.
right. Well,
Right.
and because of that, thinks he knows better than God, because God said bow down to Adam. But Iblis said, well, you created me before Adam. And I don't think he mentioned Iblis is a genie made from fire. Adam's made from clay. So I'm made from fire. I'm older than Adam. I should have more respect. And yet you're telling me to bow down to him? No, I won't do that.
Right.
And in a way, it actually makes sense. It actually makes sense from Iblis's point of view. It's like, imagine if you worked at a company for, say, 30 years, and you slowly climbed your way through the ranks, and now you're, say, the vice president of the company. And then one day the president calls you into the office and says, hey, we just hired this new kid straight out of college. You need to train him for 2 weeks, how to do your job, and then after that, you're out. That's not fair. You're going to say, no way. How could you possibly do that to me? How could you do that to me? That doesn't make any sense. I won't do that. But this is the test that we face as humans, is that even when things don't make sense to us, we still have to obey God. And that's what Islam is really all about. It's the constant test of your will to obey God. Even when life gets crazy and life, like in Gaza right now, people are being blown into bits. And you see people there still, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, praise God, when their family is ashes.
Right.
Yeah. So this is what Islam is all about. All right. I don't know where we're even at here.
And that seems to be the only real significance of it.
Eating the apple.
But I thought, maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe God just blows off into an angry rampage the next verse. So I look at the next one and it says, and then Adam received words from his Lord. And God turned to him mercifully, for he's oft returning, ever merciful. Well, if I had any doubts up till now that God is not enraged by what this has happened, that God hasn't prepared mankind for this choice, for what was eventually going to happen, that all this was preparation for mankind to begin his earthly sojourn in this famous allegory. If I had any doubts before now, I had them, certainly didn't have them after reading this verse. This verse is entirely consoling, reaching and merciful, reaching out to mankind in mercy. Mankind goes to earth. He's obviously afraid. He obviously feels remorse. He's in an unfamiliar environment. And what does God do? He turns to him. He turns to him. In Arabic, the word has a meaning of like a father turning towards an infant or a child or somebody, or a parent, a mother turning towards her child. And he turns to him mercifully, and for God is oft returning, ever merciful. And Adam receives words from his Lord. What kind of words? Probably words of consolation, words of hope, words tell him not to be scared. And in the next verse, we see those are exactly the type of words that Adam receives. He says, go down, Adam and his spouse. Go down from the state, all of you together. Repeating that again, just so that we know that this is not a punishment here. Go down from the state, all of you together, and truly there will come to you guidance from me. And whoever follows my guidance has nothing to fear, nor shall they grieve. It is a
lot of words.
It's an emotional picture. This young couple is here
Say way more.
in fear, in shame, feeling remorse, and God reaches out to them and turns towards them and tells them, you have nothing to fear, nor shall you grieve. I know this is tough for you, but you've been prepared for it up till now, for your entire existence. It had to happen. This is a necessary stage in your development, in your growth, but just hang in there. Follow my guidance. Be true to me, and I'll be true to you. I'll guide you. I'll help you. I'll do whatever you need. Just follow my guidance, and you have nothing to fear, nor shall you grieve. Okay.
Do you want to stop it here? We're about halfway. Do you want to stop it and do maybe a part 2 reaction?
Sounds good.
We'll call it for today. I want to ask though, what did you find most interesting about this video? What was your favorite part of the whole video, if you can think?
Well, I think we're going to have to edit that.
That's okay. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. What do we think here? Well, I liked the very part where it compared what he was taught as in a Catholic church,
Yeah.
as compared to what he was reading from
The Quran.
and his friends who interpreted it for him.
Sure.
The parts he didn't understand, he went to people and they said, "Well, yeah, well, this is what it really means." And he was astonished, just like I was watching him.
Right.
So that was whenever you can put those two together, where you can feel what they're trying to show you. I think it's the best way you can have a reaction to information.
Yeah. You mean feel who's trying to show you that?
Well, with what he said, I felt the same way when I learned what he was saying.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
You understood why you had that reaction.
Exactly. I felt the same reaction that he was trying to convey.
Yeah, I had a similar thing, and the other video I was telling you about, maybe you could react to today, is the same story. It's the creation of Adam and Iblis, and I remember watching that video for the first time. It totally blew my mind because I knew roughly the creation story from the Bible, and the differences. There's a ton of similarities, of course, but there was these minor
Subtle differences.
Yeah, these subtle differences that actually made a huge difference. It's like, wow, that's a totally different way to look at this, and it felt more applicable to my life, and it felt like it answered important questions that I almost didn't even know that I had.
Well, I have to admit that I do have a little bit of knowledge about that most Western Christians wouldn't. The fact that it was clay that was used, and
You mean in the Bible?
right, compared to the Bible versus the Quran. So I was expecting a little bit of that. I wasn't as shocked as if I would have, if it was the first time I'd ever
In the
heard
Bible,
of it.
it's clay or it's dirt?
No, it's
dirt.
not clay. I don't think it's clay. Is it?
It's dirt, I think. Adam was created out of dirt, and then Eve was created from the rib.
A rib.
Yeah, the rib of Adam.
But does it say that in the Quran?
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I don't think so.
Well, maybe he'll deal with that in the next part 2.
Yeah, perhaps. So yeah, we can inshallah, we can react to the next half of this video in a part 2 reaction. Hopefully you all enjoyed that video, and inshallah we will see you all in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.